All right, look, thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. We've been doing at Hamina, we've been doing a few lunch and learn webinar series. So we're just trying to keep these nice and short, strictly to 30 minutes on a series of different topics. And so we're just going to sort of run through a few bits and pieces here today. I just wanted to highlight we are using Zoom today, so anyone that's jumping on, you do have the chat option, and you've also got a Q&A. And so, if at any point you would like to ask a question as we're going through some of the content here, which will be a mix of slides and some live demonstration, please put those in the chat. It'd be great to get some sort of feedback as well. All right, so maybe just a quick introduction of who I am. So that's me in the center there. This image, in case anyone didn't realize, is AI generated. And so I don't necessarily look like that, but that's apparently me as a professor, as how AI is depicting it. If anyone hasn't already connected with me as well, please, you can scan the QR code, or you can sort of look me up on LinkedIn and see my profile picture there. My role is the head of technical operations for APAC, and obviously this is a Hamina Wireless webinar. So the topic for today was the essential Wi-Fi maintenance and monitoring tools for IT professionals. And so I'm going to take you through some subsets of the Hamina product line and what I think can really sort of help on that maintenance and monitoring side, and maybe give you some sort of real world examples of how our tools can sort of alleviate some of those stress points as well. So quickly on the agenda, we're going to go through some successful Wi-Fi network best practices, proactive network upkeep and maintenance, and then we're going to look at, what is that fastest path to resolution. So where I just sort of wanted to start was, what is the, successful Wi-Fi network best practices? And so from where I sit, and I talk to a lot of customers, all day long, and, I talk with a lot of vendors and things like that. And probably one of the number one things where people do start to go wrong is on the planning side. So we've got the Hamina Network Planner. We've also got the Plus version. I'll show you some functions that are in the Plus version today. That's where you sort of want to start for that baseline Wi-Fi design. You really want to start there, build up that Wi-Fi network, and then you would sort of maybe move to the validation side of things. And so validation is really all about understanding, can I, match what I put in the simulation versus what was actually happening in the real world, or what's actually happening in the real world. And there's numerous use cases for this. Sometimes, and in my previous services experience, I may not have always been the person to actually deploy, install, or implement the network, but I would do the design and I would do the Wi-Fi site survey. And so, if the network hasn't been implemented to my specification, to my design specification, that's going to look very, very different. And so that's why the validation piece is there. On the deployment side, in Hamina Network Planner, we do have import and export integration variations with leading Wi-Fi cloud vendors. And so basically you can sort of auto deploy from Hamina to the AP vendor, and it's really sort of streamlines that deployment process. So, it's very nice, very, very fast, very seamless. And then on the monitoring and troubleshooting side, we've got a subset of our Hamina Network Planner Plus product, which we call Hamina Live View. And so Hamina Not Live View, again, this is all API driven. It is vendor integration driven with your leading Wi-Fi cloud vendor. And that basically allows us to get a live viewport of the network telemetry as it stands currently right now. And so I'm going to sort of explain that a little bit more in some detail in the next couple of slides. And then we will get into a practical example of what that sort of looks like as well. And so, just to sort of encapsulate, what this all is, this is what I would sort of classify as like, a typical, Wi-Fi network life cycle. And it may not always start, at the planning, validation, deployment, monitoring, and troubleshooting phase. Your network might be at different points in time. And so you've sort of got different tools within the Hamina stack that can help sort of, alleviate some of those pain points, and also sort of, help you get to that next phase, and maybe even, sort of save time and money when it's getting to like the troubleshooting side, where no one wants to be sort of having these knee-jerk reactions to truck roll situations. We want to be able to sort of alleviate that as much as we can, because they're quite expensive and costly. All right. So, proactive network upkeep and maintenance. So, you've sort of got this design process, right? And that's where the initial chance of project success is. Like, that's where your best chance is going to be. And it is fundamentally, it's an educated guess. So, you ideally want to get a pretty good floor plan, ideally, like an architecturally based floor plan, because that's usually going to show like different build materials. It might have things like scaling and, it'll have well defined, indoor and outdoor areas and things like that. That would be really fantastic. So that's where, a lot of this will sort of start. And then you've got the survey process. And so the survey process, like I mentioned before, we are checking, what did we put in our simulation versus what can we see in the real world? What is the real world telling us? And so with the survey, we've got our little, our Nomad device here. That's what we've got here at Hamina. You would take that and you would walk that around the environment to capture all the Wi-Fi signal and basically map that to a floor plan and give you a heat map. And so, this is all good and well. Very, very relevant, at the deployment phase or at day one. But what about, like in, I say day X because it could be, it could be 6 months down the track, it could be 12 months, it could be years down the line. Most Wi-Fi networks these days, I hear, are sticking around from anywhere from 3 to 7 years. So that's quite a long time, and quite a lot of budget that gets put into these networks when they're stood up. We want to make sure that they are still, operating as effectively and efficiently as possible over that, that 3 to 7 year period. So that sort of brings us to, okay, how can the IT professional, how can they maintain those networks over time? And I say networks because they may not just be one. It could be multiple networks. This could, be utilized over multiple sites. And so, fundamentally, we want a solution that's going to be fast, easy to use, visually relevant. And at Hamina, we excel in the visual side, and also provide real actionable results. And so the product that, or the subset of the product that we've got, is the Hamina Live View. And so this is a bit of a snapshot of what the Live View is capable of. Like I mentioned before, just by generating an API key from your cloud vendor, you can enter that into Hermina Network Planner Plus, and you can get that live telemetry, and you can get a couple of other bits and pieces there as well. Like we can do client troubleshooting, we can look at the AP network status, things like that as well. So we'll spend a little bit of time doing a live view and a live look at that in a little bit. So then we've got that fastest path to resolution. And so what we want to really try and avoid is we really want to try and avoid the truck roll situation or the truck roll scenario, right? And we always find that, it seems like, every time that there is a network related issue, it's always priority one. It has to be resolved immediately because it's impacting, all users or a subset of users. And that's going to really cause some significant problems. And if you think about the problems that impact a business, well, that's probably going to have some sort of a monetary impact on that business as well, because the staff can't actually effectively do their jobs basically. And if you think about the sheer number of wireless clients that are in the enterprise space these days, it's more than likely that if there is an issue with the Wi-Fi, that will have a pretty significant monetary impact to a business. So they want to try and minimize that. So let's go back to that truck roll scenario. And let's think about, well, what would be the most likely scenario that an IT professional would look at? And so, often number one would be a site survey. And I know that, often, I would sort of look at that and say, okay, if we've got some sort of an RF or a Wi-Fi related issue, we need to be able to go and understand what's going on. We can't see the Wi-Fi. Maybe the wireless controller isn't giving us enough detailed information. So we need to take something like the Nomad here. We need to take this to the site and we need to do a site survey. Now, the only problem with that, we've got to coordinate it with the site. And so that could take some time. And I've heard of, scenarios where the network engineer can't get to the site for a matter of weeks, and that's going to cause a problem because the problem is impacting and, having, monetary impact to the business now. It could be an intermittent issue. So the problem with intermittent issues is if you don't capture it while you've got this guy in your arsenal, while you're there on site, then everything's going to look okay. And so intermittent issues can be really, really tricky to try and capture because the data it's very static. It's only as it's happening right there and then. And then you've got travel considerations and costs involved as well. And so, speaking from an APAC perspective, where, I'm based in Australia, if I've got to support Asia Pacific and I've got a problem in Singapore or Japan or India, I have to travel there and there is a cost associated with that as well. So, how do we sort of balance that? Um, and so then we look at what we've got with Hamina Live View, which is in the Planner Plus product. And so, it's basically a simple API key entry. So we generate an API key on the Wi-Fi vendor side. We enter that into Hamina Network Planner Plus. We get instant RF visibility on the network. We get network visibility, so we can see the APs that are up, the APs that are down. We can see, their MAC address, firmware versions, uptime, things like that as well. And then we also have client visibility as well, and we can do a bit of troubleshooting on the client side too. And so I sort of look at this and think, okay, well, if we think about that client visibility, we don't need, any soft agents, any hardware agents, anything like that on those clients. The client just has to be associated to the network. And of course, if it's a client issue that's not associated to the network, well, it's probably limited to the client itself, and that's a whole separate troubleshooting workflow. But if the client is having problems and it is associated to our network, well, we could use something like Hamina Live View to troubleshoot that. You've also got some alternative use cases here, and this is something that our customers have come up with as well. And so, number one would be like site audits. And so, again, back in my professional services days, I've been asked to do these as well, where I've been asked to go and do a site audit. And so, that required me, noting the make and model of various 802.3 switching infrastructure that was in the site, the various access points, their MAC addresses, serial numbers, things like that as well, doing a Wi-Fi site survey, doing a couple of packet captures, so on and so forth. And so if you think about what I'll show you in live view, we are able to do things like site audits, and we can do them remotely from wherever we are. We think about remediation efforts. Well, when we do this API call and we pull the data in, we can actually see where the access points are currently located, and then we can also use some environmental learning trickery techniques to look at moving the access points around and seeing how that might impact the RF profile of the environment as well, and maybe even also adding some predictive access points into the mix as well. And then that also sort of extends into the redesign side of things as well. And so we might be looking at this, the network, the 3 to 5 year period is up. We need to start a migration. Maybe we're going to sort of migrate to like something like, that's got 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi 7. We could use the live view to bring all of that current Wi-Fi telemetry into Hamina and have a look at it, and then sort of understand where are we going to start from a redesign perspective, as opposed to we're starting from scratch, blank piece of paper with a floor plan and building the design, and starting from the very beginning. So it's pretty powerful stuff. So just give me a second here, and what I'll do is I'm going to pause. I'm going to bring up the Hamina Network Planner, and I'll show you what we're going to do with the live view integration. All right, you should be able to see that. And now, like I mentioned, any questions, please throw them in the chat, and we can answer them as we go. All right. So what I've done, and this is all I've really done for this project, is I've just created a Hamina Australian Office project. I haven't done anything else. And you can see here it's asking me to drag and drop some maps in, or some floor plans. I can write notes. I can click on some of these YouTube tutorials. I've also got a knowledge base that I can access as well. So I haven't even got a floor plan in the project yet. What I can do is I can click straight onto live. And so keep in mind, no floor plan that I have to physically have, on my MacBook Drive or anything like that. I'm purely just going to click on connect infrastructure, and you can see the list of vendors that we support for live view. I'm going to go down to the Juniper Mist and click on that. And now I've already added my credentials in here. So I've already had the API key generated for me. But you can sort of see here, you could add a new one in if you wanted to. But if I click next, basically what I'll get is I get my organizational and then I get my site list here. And so, you could have multiple organizations, you could have multiple sites, depending on how you want your structure and your hierarchy done within Hermina. And then just a checkbox on, well, what floor plans do you want to bring into the live view? So I can click on, the floor that we've got here, and I'm going to click on the import button. And so we're doing this all in real time. Now, keep in mind, I'm based in Australia. This is basically pulling in the live view import from our lab that's based in Helsinki in Finland. And so, it's middle of the night there. And that's done that, literally within 5 seconds, very, very quickly. And you may have noticed it's done a couple of things. So I can't continue without sort of highlighting a couple of things. We did have a production push overnight. We have put all of our AI features in the tool, and they're all switched on by default. So, for instance, it's already set a scope for the environment. So you can sort of see here the AI has already scoped the environment, so we don't have all this RF bleed outside of the building. It's already scoped it for us, and so I think that looks pretty good. It's also automatically drawn in all of the walls. So if I wanted to go down the design path, again, depending on where I am in that network life cycle, I could do that as well. I've already got my access points placed there based on my current infrastructure. And if I highlight those APs, it's the same AP, the Juniper AP32, that is there live right now. You'll see here, I can't change that, and it's got a proper MAC and serial number. So, what live view is doing is it brings in the live access points into that live view port. But then when I switch over to simulation, I can have a bit of a sandbox and I can play around with it. I could go through a remediation. I could go through the audit that I talked about before. I could go through a complete redesign of my infrastructure. And you can see that it's very, very fast, very, very quick. All right, so back to live view. So let's switch back into 2D view and we'll have a look at a couple of things. So what we'll notice straight off the bat is we get our heat map straight away. So again, very visual, which is something that we really excel at Hermina. And so I've got this different heat maps that I can look through here. I've got primary, secondary, tertiary. I've got things like SNR. I can cycle through something like data rate, right? You can sort of see these edge cases here that don't look great. There's probably also some CCI there. I've got interference as well. And so, depending on what I've got on the interference side, I can sort of have a look around here. Maybe on 2.4 is probably better. There we go. And so when I minimize that and I roll the mouse over, you'll see over on the legend over in the bottom left here, it actually shows me what is actually causing problems, right? And it highlights the APs that are causing interference. So I've got these 3 access points here that are all on channel 1. Very visual, very easy to understand. And then I've got my channel utilization here, and I've got Wi-Fi, and I've also got non-Wi-Fi as well, which is really, really nice. So we've got some really nice heat maps that, again, brings that RF perspective right to the forefront, which is really, really great. I've also got my switching here as well. So I've actually got, not only I've got the switch here, so we've got the 2300 here, I've got my power budget, I've also got my ports, my usage, and my freely available ports. And so we do this in the live view for Juniper. We also do it in the planning side as well. So if you were going through and you were doing simulation within Hermina, you would also have the port mapping with the power budgets and all that sort of stuff there as well. But we're also doing it in live. So again, from an audit perspective, I could say, okay, by just bringing this API key, I know that we've got a 2300 switch here connected to like a single AP32, and then I've got another switch over here, which is connected to like an AP33 and an AP45, etc., etc. So I've got my channels shown here as well, which is great. And then I've also got my clients. And so that which is the bubbles underneath. And so the bubbles underneath indicate that I've got 2 clients currently associated on channel 1. I've got 4 clients currently associated on channel 6, so on and so forth. And so I can see where the client density sort of looks like as well, which is really nice. All right. Now, that's all good and well. What happens if if I did have a downed AP? If I had a downed AP, the AP would actually go red, and you would actually see a coverage gap. And I've tested that. I'm not going to try and wake someone up in Finland and ask them to disconnect an AP, but that is also what will happen. So it is, sort of real time in that respect as well. But the other scenario was like the troubleshooting side. And so there's a couple of things that we could do. So number one is we might go after this access point up in the top right purely because it's got a whole bunch of clients associated to it at the moment. So if we click on that AP, we get a couple of things pop up. One is we do get this little sidebar which tells us, what the access point is with the MAC and serial number and the make and model, things like that as well. It then gives us some statistical information about about the access point as well. So I've got 4 clients, 2 are active, 2 are inactive. So they're probably like in some sort of a sleep mode here. And I can see we've got 2 different clients currently connected there. I've got some things like, the MAC address, uptime, the firmware version, things like that as well. And if I see, a particular client that I'm interested in, or again, this could be like some sort of a support scenario where someone is reporting an issue. Maybe it's Mersu here. We click on that, and then we straight away get the client view itself. So we've moved from holistically looking at the heat map to individually looking at the heat map and the access point itself to now drilling down to the client level. So we're moving down the tier, and you can see it very, very easily able to do that. If we are in the client view, like we are here, so you've got this live clients option here, you can also search up the top as well. So if you had a very large campus and you had, a particular subset of devices that were having problems, you could type in, iPad or Android or Samsung or whatever the vendor might be. You could bring those up. You could search by MAC address as well. You could search by, by the user, ID as well. You'd be able to bring that up. And so we can see here, we get a bunch of statistical information. And what we're doing is we're asking the AP, in this case, it was the AP 33, thought it was an AP 33. We're asking it to run a packet capture against the Mersu client that we're currently looking at here. So that's how we're able to get all of this statistical information. And so while that AP is running a packet capture, we're getting things like, latency, current signal, we get things like utilization, then we get client specific, like it's receive and transmit, retries, number of packets that have been transmitted and received, whereabouts it's connected, things like that as well, what protocol it's on, stuff like that as well. And, so for example, like, just making something up, this could be 802.11n, it could be dual band, but for some reason it's only connecting on 2.4 and the client's reporting like a really, really poor experience. And so, we may need to drill down into why is the client only connecting on 2.4 and not 5 gigahertz, as an example. And so, we can do a couple of things here. We could even force the client to reconnect. So if we do that, we'll basically disassociate from the network and the client will eventually reconnect. And so we can do that now and we'll get a bit of a drop there and then the client will reconnect. You can sort of see we've got a list of clients on the side there. We can sort of move that around as well. Now, the last thing that I sort of wanted to show was, if we go over to here, we've got all of the wall infrastructure in place. That's all good and well, but what we're going to do is we're going to delete all of the walls. And so you can sort of see here, if we go into 3D mode, we've only got the access points that we pulled in from live view. So we've got these now simulated access points, or the simulation varied access points in the simulation sandbox. And so what we can do from here is we've got some settings in here. And so what we could do is we can use the simulation on the predictive mode to use the environmental learning. And so what we're doing is we are going to use the known RF environment that we're getting from the live view, and we're going to translate that into the simulation. So again, no drawing of walls. We deleted those earlier. nothing like that. This could be used for, remediation. It could be also used for redesign, where again, the initial reaction might be, I've got to go and do a site survey. In this case, we could just enter an API key through live view, bring that data in, remove the AI walls, although you could keep them in there because now it is very easy to do. And what we can do is just to sort of show you what it's doing, we can click on an AP43 here. And then as we move it out into the hallway, you'll see like the propagation starts to change. We move it into the corridor here. As we move it down into a less dense area, you can sort of see the signal propagation. Now it's sort of covering almost a third of the map. As we move it sort of back up the corridor here, you see that it starts to shrink back down. As we've got like a staircase here. You can move it into the restrooms, and you can see it's a lot denser um, as we move it through. So you can sort of see that all sort of happening there. So just a bit of an idea of some of the situations we can do. All right. So if we jump back to the last slide that we sort of finished on, and we'll finish up here, and we'll get to the Q&A. If we think about the Hamina Live View, which is with the Planner Plus version of the product, very simple to enter the API key. The API key generation does vary a little bit per vendor, but it's pretty simple to enter, and then you drop it in and away you go. Some of them have also got like a shared secret, but we've got instructions on how to do that, and so do the vendors as well. We showed you the instant RF visibility. We showed you the network visibility. We also showed you the client visibility. And then we went through the use cases. We went through the site audit use case. We went through the remediation use case, and we also went through the redesign use case as well. So I think, on a fast path to resolution, site survey tools are not going to go away. They're not going anywhere, anytime soon. But you do have this other API-driven option that can be done totally remote, can be done from the other side of the globe, as I just demonstrated with the office in Helsinki, but is incredibly effective at being able to, to get some significant telemetry and troubleshooting scenarios. So I'm gonna end it there, and I'll leave it on this slide as long as I can, depending on the questions that come through. If anyone does want to know more, look, they can go to hamina.com. If you go to hamina.com/grant, you will actually have access to being able to book a slot with me. So if you want to sort of book a meeting and we can chat more, and I can give you, more of a curated demo, or maybe you want a trial, please go there. Otherwise, you can also email me, grant@hamina.com. Otherwise, don't know why PowerPoint wants access to my camera, but anyway, otherwise, yeah, you can also get me on LinkedIn as well, is what I meant to say at the very, very end there. All right. So we've got a couple of questions. The live view is through API integration between Hamina and the vendor AP. It is so the live view is through API integration between Hamina and the vendor's cloud platform. So that's how it sort of works there. So depending on the scenario that you're wanting to do there. And then the live view, can it do spectrum analysis through the AP? It's not doing spectrum analysis per se, but for spectrum analysis, you've got the interference options that we sort of showed earlier. Otherwise, we do have spectrum analysis options that can be paired with the Nomad as well. For instance, we've got this guy that can be paired with the Nomad if you're looking to do spectrum analysis. All right. I'll keep the session open for a couple more minutes if anyone's got any other questions. But otherwise, we do appreciate people, carving a bit of time out of their day. I know this was a short one. We thought, maybe something short and sweet would be a little bit better. But look, we are almost at time. There was one more question. Can I just get the planner without site survey? Yes, you can. So the way that our licensing structure works, you can get either the planner or the planner plus option, which has got all of the planning, or you've got like the additional options there, like the live view. And then we've got our on-site option, which is a totally separate license and it's a separate cost. So if you're just all about doing planning and design, you can just buy, for instance, Planner Plus, which would also give you the live view option in there as well. So yeah, again, if you want to know more, grant@hamina.com. Otherwise, hamina.com/grant. You can book a time, and then yeah, we can chat some more. But yeah, we might end it there. I really appreciate everyone for making the time today, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. All right, bye for now.